Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this very special webinar from iFold. Today, we have a case study with AccessPay, looking at how NSG Group went from complexity to clarity in transforming its payment processes globally. My name's Jay Viderlingham, and we're very lucky today to be joined by Tom Livock from AccessPay, who will be sharing the automation journey with us and giving you some tips as well about how to implement some of these lessons in your own business. We've also got Louise Graham as well, COO and Head of Institute at iFol, an expert in the industry with a background working in finance operations for huge organisations like Santander, Costa Coffee, as well as the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office. But before we dive in, we always like to get you guys involved in the audience. And we would like to start with a quick poll, if that's okay. So, sort of fingers on your buzzers and get ready. Here we go. So, how much of your payment process is currently automated? Is it manual? So, that's no or very little automation, partially automated, a mixture of manual and automated steps, or are you fully automated, kind of complete end-to-end automation? So, those are the options. How much of your payment process is currently automated? Is it manual, partially automated, or fully automated? So just I'll give a couple of seconds for you guys to get your votes in, and we can kind of have a bit of a state of play really as to where we are in the process. So yeah, how much of your payment process is currently automated? You've got one choice here, either manual, it's either partially automated, or it's that mixture of sort of that manual or automated steps, or you're fully automated. So do let us know with the poll answers. Be good to get that in. Um, and here we go. Right. So, oh, that's interesting. So yeah, 50% of people saying they're manual, 38% partially automated, and 13% fully automated. So that's really good to kind of get a bit of a state of play there. And I suppose bring in you guys a little bit before we get into it. Tom Livock, first of all, what's your reaction to that poll, firstly? Is that to surprise you?
It doesn't actually, Jay. Yeah, that's quite normal for what we see. So most corporates these days aren't fully automated. They still have very much a manual process. AccessPay is here to help automate those processes. We're obviously going to talk about that shortly. But typically, what we see is customers still using online banking as a method of not only making a payment, whether that's supplier payments or a treasury payment, expenses payroll, but also bringing back statement data as well. People are logging in to online banking portals like you or I would do for our own individual banking and downloading statement data manually. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's quite normal.
Quite normal. Louise, what about your thoughts on that? Does that surprise you, the findings of the poll?
No, I think well, I'm surprised at the 13% that are fully automated. Actually, I'd love to know who those people are. I think that's quite a lot of people, and I think it's quite a hard state to get to from. And I think 50% of they're quite interesting figures, but not that surprising.
Okay, well, that's great. And thank you, everyone, for sharing your input. It's really helpful for us here today to see where everyone stands, basically. And if you have any thoughts or questions throughout this webinar, please do add them into the chat and we'll try and get to them. Now, let's talk about why automation matters and what it looks like in practice. So, Tom, you've lived through this transformation firsthand. Firstly, I suppose, can you paint us a picture of what things were like before and then how automation changed all that?
Yeah, so the case study here is a customer we've worked with since 2015. They are Nippon Sheet Glass or NSG. In the UK, most people probably won't recognise that name, but actually will recognise their UK organisation, which is Pilkington Glass. And they are a very large, NSG are a very large glass manufacturer. They have over 100 different locations across the world. Turnover is about £4 billion. So, a very large organization indeed. And this slide, I'm just going to share my screen now, and this will show what their process was like prior to automation. So very much a manual process. You can see on the left-hand side there are a number of different finance systems. So they had an ERP system, different treasury management systems, and then other back office systems. And the process you can see in the middle is very much manual. So their finance teams would be logging into online banking, and you can see on the right-hand side multiple different banks. This is obviously on a global basis. And with that comes inconsistency because there are different processes depending on whereabouts in the world they are, which bank they're working with. And really, that causes a lot of inefficiencies, and also can cause not just inefficiencies, but the whole process becomes very difficult to manage from a finance perspective. Things like how much cash do I have? That simple question of, where's our cash and how much do we have? When you're an organization like NSG, that becomes a very difficult question to answer before the automation.
Okay, so yeah, this that sort of sets a bit of a groundwork as to kind of where things are. Louise, is this sort of this model, I suppose, is this sort of typical about where lots of companies are before they make the jump to automation?
Absolutely, yes, it is. I've seen lots of organisations where there are multiple bank accounts, multiple currencies, especially where there's a company that is acquisitive. So a lot of companies buy other companies, and with that, they buy the bank accounts. And there are usually conditions that go with those bank accounts, and they have to be closed within a certain time. But of course, you haven't necessarily got all the history or all the people to say what are all the transactions in those bank accounts. So I think it can be very complicated once you've got more than one bank account and once you're dealing with a lot of cash. The other thing to say is there's got to be some reconciliation along here. And
Right.
so I should think the bank reconciliation ones were absolutely horrifying to do
Yeah.
in the pre-automated state, because just a couple of transactions can throw everything out. So yeah, I'm very used to seeing lots of systems that don't talk to each other and lots of bank accounts that don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
And what most companies want, they don't want that position. They want to know how much cash have I got at any given point, and they want to know that the processing is seamless and not manual, because as we all know, the minute you introduce manual process, you introduce risk, and errors. So yeah, I'm used to seeing this kind of thing.
Sure. Okay, so Tom, take us back then. So that's the lay of the land before you sort of stepped in with your automation journey. What was the first thing you did next, and how did that process go for you?
Sure. Yeah. So everyone is aware of the term shared service center. And obviously what that normally means is there would be different parts of the organization. So in this case, you might have NSG in the UK, NSG in America, NSG in Europe, NSG in Japan, and they would share that resource. So in this case, this is a finance resource. And in NSG's case, they created a shared service center in Poland, just to give this some context. So what you'd think happens there is that obviously there's some level of automation, or the processes become unified. Actually, what actually happened, and I think this is, Louise, tell me if you've seen this already in your experiences, is actually when you create a shared service center, all that happens is you lift and shift those processes and just put them in the same building. And actually, you're doing exactly the same thing you were doing locally, whether that was in Japan or the UK or America, but you're doing the same processes. It's just in one building rather than being spread across the world. Is that what you've seen, Louise?
Yes, I think that's what I've seen, because people often say, I want a shared service center, so I want to bring lots of back office functions from various areas into one team. So they think they can do a lift and shift, or they do a lift and shift, absolutely. They just go, well, so what if it's all done in one place? That's the only difference. But actually, when you don't go and look at your processes and you don't look at optimizing those before or after you lift and shift, then you're in trouble, because actually then you've got exactly what this diagram shows. You've got lots of people doing different things in different ways, and you've got inefficiency in your processes. So yeah, I'm used to people thinking, oh, you just move it, it's just a different place.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as that, absolutely not. And in my view, you want best practice process, you want everybody to be doing the same thing, and that's certainly not the case if you just just move people into one place. That
Right.
that doesn't that's it might be a shared service centre, but it's not an efficient one, is
No,
what my
no,
view would be.
it just ends up being a cost exercise
Yeah,
that you've now got.
absolutely.
You've got a reduced cost because you now everybody's in the same building, but actually that's the only benefit in and the processes haven't changed at all. So that risk and that potential of fraud and the automation just it doesn't exist. It's just not there. So could we just move to the next slide, please? Should be. Let's see if this we can get the technology to work. Is that moved on to the next slide? Great. Yes. Okay, so let's talk about something called a payment factory. So we've established that NSG had the shared service center based in Poland, but actually all they've done is lift and shifted their finance processes globally and put it into one building. Um, so the idea was, how can we actually streamline our process? How can we automate this? And how can we make the process more efficient? And with that, does that mean that we actually are able to reduce fraud, improve our security, and actually basically have a consistent process, irrespective of the subsidiary, as I say, whether it's UK, Japan, or America? Can we standardize our process? And that was the background of a payment factory, is actually meaning that we're now starting to think not just about having the same people in the same building, but actually then having a level of automation, and that automation then meaning that the process is standardized irrespective of the type of payment. So we talked about supplier payments, or whether that's a direct debit, for example, or whether it's payroll, and more importantly, whether it's a direct debit, payroll, or supplier payment in the UK, in America, or in Japan, and also the bank that payment is being made out of. So that's the approach. And this, as this slide talks about, is having that standardized process for payments. And because you are standardizing your process, you can then think about how many banks do I actually need? Do I actually can I go through a bank process to reduce the number of banks and potentially even reduce the number of bank accounts? And the benefit of that then is obviously a reduced bank fees for that organization, and my bank charges, my operational charges reduce. Um, and if I'm able to have less number of banks, can I then centralize my cash? And what that means is now I can actually see my cash visibility because it's centralized. But then can I actually move that cash overnight, for example, to generate high rate interest into a high rate interest account, and actually start generating some interest overnight from having that centralized pool. So lots of benefits that come with this process, not just actually about um, becoming more efficient, but on this last point about actually centralizing cash and being able to move the cash overnight, actually becoming cash generative and actually start generating cash by doing that.
So it's almost like you're sort of rethinking how payments work in the first place, taking that step back and thinking it's not just about the technology, it's taking that kind of that overview, I suppose, about the whole process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the technology is an enabler. The technology is available, as we'll talk about very soon. But it's actually almost like you said, Jay. It's taking a step back and actually thinking, this beast has grown over many years. Like Louise is talking about, whether it's been um, uh, acquisitive companies that have acquired different organizations and then had different bank relationships because of that. It's almost taken a step back and said, this is where we are now. How can we make this process more efficient? How can we become not only more efficient, but actually start generating cash from the position we have?
Okay. So that's sort of kind of like your mind map, I suppose, of what you were going to do. Let's I suppose move on in the journey and find out what then happened.
Yeah, so this was a very long process and a very large project, as you can appreciate. It's a global project. So NSG engaged with a number of external consultants. This is out there, so I'm able to talk about the ERP that they use. So their back office system was SAP. I'll move on to the next slide if that's okay. So this is the new world, and you can see it's a very clean slide compared to the previous one, which was all sorts of arrows going in all sorts of different directions. Um, and on the left-hand side is NSG's back office finance system. So as I mentioned, that's a SAP ERP system. They also had a treasury management system, as you can see down at the bottom. AccessPay is in the middle, and NSG's banks are on the right-hand side. And where the automation arrow is pointing both ways, that is showing is payments flowing out from NSG through to AccessPay and instructing the bank. But then the arrow coming back is that statement information. And we talked before briefly about cash visibility. And what that statement data does is provide that cash visibility across all the banking estate. So now NSG can see how much cash they have, as well as being automate their payments and standardize the payments. This whole process becomes a 360-degree, if you like, process of payments going out and what's our current cash position with that statement data coming back.
I mean, you made that sound very simple there, where you kind of sort of hop, skipped, and jumped through a little bit. But as you mentioned, it was a long process, wasn't it?
It
What was
was.
the main sort of sticking point, if there were any, in terms of was it dealing with the international side of the banks? Was it obviously as a global company as well? Did the international dimension help in terms of the time frame of that? Was that why it took so long?
So actually, what happened? The project started in 2016, and there was a first pilot release in 2018. The first pilot was based on three different countries and two different currencies. So really was a fairly small pilot in the overall. This was going to be a global project. Um, so that process, basically, the starting point of that process was actually that this had never been done before. This was a an approach. Not only NSG hadn't done this before, the SAP system, which is called S/4HANA, that had only just been released on the market. So, and the way NSG needed to implement it was fairly complex. So that meant that actually not only had NSG not done this before, but this is a new form of technology that was being applied on a very large scale. So that was why the pilot was important and the release of the pilot in 2018. Initially, there was, I think we'd come on to stakeholders, but there was initially a lot of pushback internally within NSG. And the reason being is they had a process that worked. It wasn't great. Probably a few people might admit that, but it worked. So why change? Why move away from something that was working to this new world, which was risky because it was new technology, number one, and number two, it never had been applied to NSG before. So how did they know it was going to work in their business? And the treasury team in NSG were the champions of this. They were actually the people that actually built this service. And in 2018, as I said, the pilot was released and came with it some very eye-opening results, as in very positive results.
Okay. So you mentioned there's some resistance that kind of came up, I suppose, when you suggested this. I mean, Louise, this can be quite common, can't it? People not seeing the benefits straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important in a project to talk right at the beginning about why we're doing it. And like Tom said, it can be quite difficult if something already works. It's ain't broke, why fix it? So you really have to make sure that you tease out all the benefits. Such as having visibility of your cash. That would seem the big obvious one here. You know how much cash you've got at any one time in all your bank accounts, which previously might have taken quite a bit of unpicking. So, yeah, I think it's really important to talk about why we're doing something, to talk about how you're going to de-risk it as well. So, and a pilot is or a proof of concept or a pilot is always a very good way of doing that because it gives people a bit of faith that they can see it works rather than just be told it works. They can actually see it works. So I think a pilot and a proof of concept are always a good idea, as well as really just talking about why are we doing it and what are we going to get out of it. And I think it's very clear to us now. It's easy to see afterwards what you're going to get out of it. It's not always so easy to explain that at the beginning, I think.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The proof of concept thing can be so key, can't it, when it comes to winning over people within the organization. I mean, Tom, for you, it seems like one of the important lessons here was kind of stakeholder engagement. How did you bring the senior stakeholders along with you?
Yeah, so the again, this is just to take the just to put it to not claim that, because obviously this is my customers in NSG who have managed to manage those stakeholders. But there was not only was the stakeholder management required, and that's obviously on a global basis with NSG being headquartered in Japan, and actually this was the European team who were managing this rollout. Uh, but also, the NSG team had to communicate to multiple parties. So you can see here where they were engaging with the banks and multiple banks on the right hand side, engaging with AccessPay, as well as their own team and the consultants that were external consultants that were implementing SAP. So they were having to manage communication on multiple levels. And ultimately, the stakeholders, the position they got to with the stakeholders was that actually they obviously went ahead with the project, and the pilot was so positive, that the next stage of the rollout, rather than being something that was difficult to get engagement and support on, was something that was actively pursued internally there, and the support they got internally to make sure this whole success, this project was going to be a success.
Okay, and I suppose, Louise, from your perspective in the industry, how important is it also to bring along the teams on the ground as well, the people who are actually going to be running these payment processes?
Yeah, vitally important. Vitally important. I think sometimes it can be easy to forget about those and just think about the wider stakeholders, the banks, the directors, the VPs, the managers, and think about those and not think about the people in the organisation who are going to actually operate the process. I think there were hundreds of people, if I'm right, Tom, who were involved in this manual process previously, and they were probably very important to get on board because they must have been thinking, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for my job? What does it mean for me day to day? Am I going to be made redundant?
Right.
And I think I'm right in saying there weren't redundancy situations. It was more an avoidance of needing more people at a later stage in this project, which the organisation would have done. So it was an avoidance of future headcount. So I think it's really important to show and talk to and consider as really important the stakeholders who are working in the payments teams, and not only that, not only to involve them, but to listen to them, because they will know about those silly little things that need to happen that actually, bigger picture you might not know without talking to the people who are doing the job. So they might know about some strange little quirk of the process that, if it doesn't happen, has a big impact. So it's really important to involve them as early as possible and to be really good at communicating with them about what it means for them and about how they can get involved, how they can help.
Sure. Okay, so Tom, what was your next step then in terms of the process?
So ultimately, the whole project was released in 2022. So it started in 2016. So effectively a 6-year project, end to end, and the result was fairly impressive. So in 2024, this is the current scope of that payment factory, of what it's providing. You can see that there are over 17 countries that are using the payment factory in 10 different currencies. There are 48 companies, and there are over 300 affiliates or subsidiaries of NSG who are involved in this process. So a very significant, a very successful end project that's been rolled out and is continued to be rolled out, actually, further than just the countries that are shown on this slide. So South America, Far East, as you'd expect with a Japanese headquartered organization, are now the next areas that NSG are focusing on for the payment factory and for the shared service center. So an extremely successful, as I say, and the complexity that is underlying this is highly significant, but others at the same time has simplified the process for those finance teams that are based in Poland.
Okay.
One of the stats that I like to quote is that, as Louise just mentioned, there literally hundreds of people were involved in the payment factory, or in the shared service center, and NSG had expansion plans. Without going the automation, they were considering having to build a second building to house because they were going to have to hire more people for that shared service center. And actually, the result of the payment factory was they're now able to do way more with way less people. And that second building never got built. It was never needed in the end because the automation was so powerful.
Which
Well,
is
that's
hugely, it's amazing, isn't it? That's a huge cost saving. The other thing that strikes me, Tom, about this, just looking at this and the fact that you just talked about it's being expanded, is it sounds like you built something that was just brilliantly scalable, which is what everyone wants because businesses want to expand. So I'm assuming you can just bolt on new countries and new banks, and that works in a seamless fashion. Is that fair to say?
It is. I
Yeah.
don't want to take all the credit for that because although in terms of AccessPay's capability, yes, we can effectively add on banks to this process, and that's what NSG have been doing as they've been reaching out into new countries. But ultimately, we're also dependent on the other side. So those SAP systems that I showed on the previous slide, those SAP systems also need to be expanded. And so it's again, it's a teamwork within NSG for coordinating both the AccessPay capability and what's required with those back office systems as well.
yeah, and that's that scalable nature of it seems so important as well because actually what you're effectively doing there for your clients is you're sort of future-proofing their endeavors going forward, aren't you?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this isn't just you can see this not just being a sort of one and done approach. This is a phased rollout based on where the company is expanding, going back to the acquisition point, or if there's a particular issue in a certain countries, whether that's because of local regulation or an issue with a bank, then need to automate that process means that actually they can then choose which areas they go into next.
Yeah, so important. Okay, so Tom, do you have another sort of visual aid for us to get to?
One more, I'm afraid, Jay, if that's
Okay,
okay.
let's see it.
Okay, so this really summarizes where they got to. So Jay, it's a great slide because it sort of summarizes where they were before. If you remember that first slide where it was like, oh my God, they've got all these different processes, we've got all these different banks, we might have centralized all our people into one building, but actually we're still doing the same manual processes. So where they got to was they're actually able, this second point here about liquidity optimization was unbelievable, that they're able to see how much cash they had, not just how much cash they had, across all their legal entities. But they're actually then able to drill down in each of those bank accounts, and like we were talking about before, and say, well, actually, this is an operational account. We've got X million sitting here. Can't we just sweep that payment overnight, sweep those funds overnight into a high rate interest account, and then sweep it back again? And so actually they were able, this was become cash generative, rather than a process where it's actually, it was an operational expense to run this shared service center. It started to generate cash. And they never even expected that was to be the case. And during this period, if you remember back in, 2023, 2024, interest rates were quite high. So it meant that there were actually that was way more significant than they ever expected. Um, we talked about the operational cost saving, the fact that the second building story. That's a great one. The one that also is just, and the timing of it is incredible. It is about the payment controls and fraud and error. So if I take you back to sort of 2022, um, Russia just invaded Ukraine, and what NSG were able to do, again, they're obviously a global business and they operate in multiple different areas. They were able to apply sanction screening very quickly, very easily, because they've got a single process now. Rather than having all these different processes, they have a single process. So they're able to apply sanction screening because of the invasion of Ukraine. And then the other thing that happened, so Silicon Valley Bank, so they were obviously a US bank, and unfortunately they collapsed in 2023. Now, it didn't have a direct impact on NSG, but they're again able to make sure that any payments that were being made out to Silicon Valley Bank, they're able to again control those payments because of this single view, this automation that they had. And so because of that, they were also able to stop fraud attempts. And this is where this becomes it takes it to the next level where we're not just talking about increasing efficiency, making the employees do adding value rather than carrying out a mundane task like logging into online banking, but actually creating that additional value by adding these additional controls into the process.
Sure, sure. I mean, that's when you explain it that way, it's so kind of visible, isn't it? The success that you've got and the benefits to your client as well. But I mean, I have to sort of press you on it a little bit because every project, no matter how successful, has a few bumps in the road along the way. Looking back, is there anything you wish you might have done differently?
Yes, there are three. There's probably three good lessons learned from this one. So the first was, uh, and this is difficult because this was so new, because this had never been done before in terms of building this type of service, using SAP S/4HANA, using AccessPay in this way, and connecting to multiple banks. So taking time, as much time as possible, to go through that design process and making sure the design is correct. So that's sort of lesson number one. Um, because of the pilot, that really helped actually when we went to full rollout because we'd actually gone through that pilot phase. But absolutely, take time in that design phase. The second is about support. And when I say support, I don't mean internal support. I mean reaching out to your peers within your industry sector, reaching out to industry experts in the field, whether that's Access Pay or otherwise, but taking support from as many areas as possible. And then relaying that back into your team, into your internal team that you're working with to make sure that going back to that design is the right one.
Yeah.
Uh, and then the final one we've touched on already is stakeholder management, and probably that's the one that with of the three that I'm highlighting, as early as possible, engage with those stakeholders, make sure they are clear on what their current process looks like now and what the benefits are going to be of going through this process. Now, in this case, the actual benefits exceeded what we expected was going to come out from it. So those would be the three, Jay.
Okay. And Louise, I mean, when any project like this, you kind of need to have a really strong project manager, don't you? I mean,
Yeah.
that this sort of transformation couldn't have happened without that sort of role, you imagine. And what are your thoughts on having somebody to drive it, a project like this?
Yeah, you certainly need it. One thing I would say, Tom, is it's very, very, very unusual in my experience to have a project that over delivers on the benefits. It's far more common at the end of a project for everyone to go, well, we didn't get quite what we expected, but we did well and it was still the right thing to do. So I think very, very impressive that you have delivered. Yeah, I think project management's really important, as you say, Jay. It's really important at the beginning of the project to agree the scope, and it never ceases to amaze me how long it takes to agree the scope of a project, and more importantly, to say what's out of scope. Because I think when there's a big transformation project, the temptation is to throw everything in there, and people will say, "Well, this project will fix the world, it'll fix everything." So I think in scope and out scope is really important, and I think a good project manager can manage stakeholders well as well, which is such an important part of project management, and making sure they know exactly what's going to be delivered and what's not going to be delivered. But you presumably have this lovely task at the end of your project of saying, we said we'd deliver this and actually we did lots more came out that we didn't even know about. So that's a lovely position to be in. But yeah, I agree, strong project this could not have happened presumably without really good project management. So
Yeah.
kudos to all the project managers involved, because there were a lot of moving parts to this by the sound of it, and it was very effective and very, very successful. But actually, if somebody hadn't been managing the stakeholders, the scope at the beginning, the risks and issues that arose as they went along, it wouldn't have been a success. So yeah, I love a good project manager.
Yeah, I'd like to give some kudos here too, if I may, to my two clients, so Chris Davis and Andrea Fay at NSG. Louise, to your point, without those two effectively managing not just their own internal team, but actually there were multiple partners involved. There was the consultants, there was AccessPay, there was SAP, and then there was the banks. And when I say banks, there's obviously seven banks. So that is a huge amount of project management, and coordinating that was just an incredible task from Chris and Andrea.
So I'm just thinking about our audience now, and like for those people who are listening, thinking about their own payments transformation. I mean, where should you start? What are the first steps for anyone listening to this, thinking actually this is something we could be doing?
Louise, shall I start with that one?
Go for it.
Okay, so I think a really good starting point is to effectively carry out an audit. What I mean by that is not an IT audit, but okay, so where are we now? What is it that we have in place already today? What banks do we have? I mean, it just sounds crazy, but going back to the acquisition point, some organizations may not even know that they had Silicon Valley Bank, just as an example. But the point here is, carry out that audit. What do you have in place today, not just with your banks, but in your back office systems? And what type of processes do you have in place? So, AccessPay talks about different payment types. We talk about supplier payments, we talk about treasury payments, we talk about payroll and expenses and direct debits. So, going back to the scope and what do you have in place, it's almost trying to work out, okay, so of all those things I've just mentioned, are we looking at all of them? I'd suggest not. We'd call that boiling the ocean. So let's focus on some of them. Where's the biggest pain point, or where is the biggest that bang for your buck? Excuse the Americanism, but where can I get the most value out from this project?
Hmm. Now we had a question in from one of our audience, Jeff Martin, who wants to ask, what financial systems does the client utilize?
Yeah, so I think I probably mentioned that before. So it's actually on the slide. So it's SAP is their back office ERP system, but it's S for HANA, which is I think it's probably SAP's flagship model. The SAP have a number of different types of ERP products, but that's the one that NSG used.
Okay, thank you for that. And yeah, thanks for your question. Any more questions and thoughts, do get them into the chat. We'll try and get to them before we finish. So yeah, Louise, any thoughts about where people can start then if they want to get on this automation journey?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to start. Absolutely, as you said, Tom, where are we now? But actually, also, what is our process now? And actually, probably what you'd have found, you might have in your project said, "What's our process now?" And gone, actually, there are 100 of them. There's no point in writing them all down. There are 100 of them, and they don't work anyway. So there becomes a point when it's not worth documenting the existing process. Actually, knowing what good looks like and thinking about what you would like in a perfect world, taking a clean sheet of paper, what do you want your payments process to look like, and what is best practice, whether it's payments or order to cash or procure to pay. It's good to know what is best practice and be aiming to get as close to that as you can. And I think a lot of organizations have a lot of complexity which has been introduced because people have messed around with the process, if you like, and they've got lots of offshoots of a best practice process. So I would say understand where you want to get to and understand where you are now as best you can without wasting too much time on it. Yeah.
And Tom, just as we're kind of final reflection almost, what has this transformation meant for you and for the brand, I suppose? This is, I say, this was a first in its class in terms of implementing this. What's it done for you?
Yeah, so AccessPay has been around since 2012, and we were the first. Our founder, a gentleman called Ali Moyed, he's very close to my heart. So Ali's an entrepreneur, and he said, "I'm going to put payments in the cloud in 2012." And back then, even the bank said, "You can't do it. You can't make it secure." He really was a visionary, and that entrepreneurial spirit that he saw about putting back payments in the cloud, it underwrites who we are as an organization. The fact that we're a thought leader in what we do, and really this project again underlines Access Pay as a thought leader in our space. And not only that, the other element is the global reach of this project. Um, and it's significant that actually this project, as I mentioned, continues to expand globally. Okay, today we're in UK, Europe, US, Canada, some South America, countries as well, but it's going to continue to expand. So those are the two things really that underline what it means for AccessPay. The fact that we are absolutely a thought leader in our space, but also can implement on a global basis.
Okay. And Louise, before we kind of finish, any kind of key takeaway piece of advice for people who want to kind of get onto AP automation?
Yes, I would say start. I think that's the hard thing. That's the hard thing. A lot of people just, it goes on the too hard piles, too difficult. And actually, we often say this at iFold, but you've got to start somewhere. You don't have to do all of it. I think it's amazing if you can do a great big transformation project like this and you've got the support to do that, absolutely. But even if it's just a small part, you should start with something, the biggest bang for your buck. As you said, Tom, you should start with something and automate that. You can do a pilot, you can do a proof of concept, you can reach out to experts who will help you with it. You're not alone with it, but it is 100% worth doing. The benefits are really worth having, and the reduction, it's not only a risk reduction proposition, it's a value proposition, because your lives will be enriched for it. Gosh, that sounds a bit much, doesn't it? Your lives will be enriched by AP automation, I guess, and payments automation, but they really will, because it means that your people will be doing the things that are value added that a human being needs to do, and technology will be doing the tedious stuff that technology can get on and do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that gift of time,
Sorry,
isn't it?
sorry, Jay. Yeah, if I can just add to that point from Louise, appreciate we're close to time, but that's the final bit from NSG, the final message from NSG. This became a building block, not just in the finance team and in the payment factory in the shared service center, but this became a building block across their organization of the types of transformation projects and what it means to them as an organization.
Yeah. So I mean, that's really important as well because obviously as your client, they're able to see the benefits really clearly. So, fantastic. Just to kind of recap then for our audience. So start by understanding your current landscape, involve stakeholders at every level, invest in a strong project management team, and I suppose remember that automation is as much about the people as it is about the systems as well. So we are pretty much out of time now. So big thank you to Tom and Louise for sharing your insights today, and thanks to all of you for joining us as well. Hope we've given some practical ideas to take back to your organizations. If you'd like to learn more or continue the conversation, then do please reach out to us here at iFold. We'd love to kind of hear your stories. So a big thank you once again to our guests today, Tom Livock from AccessPay. It's been fantastic to hear your journey with NSG and to kind of do a bit of a deep dive into how these projects kind of work. And Louise Graham, COO and Head of Institute at iFold as well, an expert in the field, and great to get your insights. And thank you as well, the audience, for joining us. You only get out what you put in. So big thank you for your interactions and involvement today. You can find more information about what we've discussed today on the iFold website, along with information on iFold membership. And this webinar will also be available on the website too. So please share it and watch it back when you get the chance. I'm Jay Vidalingham, and thanks again for your time. So we'll see you at the next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.